Hello? It's amazing when you push the button hard, it actually makes the machine turn on here. So thank you everybody for coming. I'm Nancy with the Historical Society, and we've got a wonderful program tonight, something very special, so we'll get to that in just a few minutes. How's Sarah doing? Sarah is still in the rehab hospital. Sarah is our vice president. She had hip surgery on the 29th of August, so it's been almost a little over 2 weeks. She's still in the rehab hospital. She'll come home hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, sometime this week. And she wishes she could be here. She says hello to everybody. And so now you have to bear with me. I've got just a few quick little announcements. We just have so darn many things going on here. So first of all, we always say thank you to everybody and their brother and the HRCA and all of our volunteers who are helping us with everything. Mark is in the back. He's doing videotaping today. All of our other board officers are here. You've seen them all around, kind of working hard. And thank you to everybody who's been working, Joyce and everybody else. Are we getting some feedback there? He's working on it. Okay, good. And thank you to everybody who's a member, a new member. You're going to become a member, and I'm sure that's 100% of this audience, right? Just humor me and say yes. And we're doing something new tonight. All of our new or newer members for the last month or two, or at least I'm trying, should have a cute little smiley face on their membership badge. So if you see somebody with a smiley face, that means they're new or renewed, and we sure appreciate that. And we do appreciate your support. Membership is relatively inexpensive, $10 if you're a senior, $20 for a family. So not bad, and that's for a calendar year, for a year from whenever you start. And one of the benefits of membership is we try to save the first 3 rows so that, especially on these nights when we've got so many people here, at least you'll be hopefully assured of a seat. Anybody new coming in, if there is still plenty of room up here, so feel free to come on up here now if you need to. Kind of readjust, but that's just one of the membership benefits. Another membership benefit is tours. We do a limited number of tours to various places, and we do limit that to members only because we are limited on space. So we have several tours that are coming up. Tony, do you want to come up and talk? Okay, so we'll let Tony come up here. As she makes her way up, I'll just tell you, she'll talk to you about a couple of them that are coming up. Other things that are going on in the community on October 4th over at Schweiger Ranch in Lone Tree, they're having like a fall festival. You'll see us over there, so if you're over there, make sure you stop over and say hello. The Metro District, the senior group with the Metro District is having a senior health and information fair, and that's going to be on November 8th at the East Ridge Auditorium. And there's some flyers out on the table out front. They weren't out there earlier, but they're out there now. So if you'd like to pick up one of those, just please do. And there's several flyers out there on the table. I think 2 or 3 of our past programs from the Estes Park program, and there's some bookmarks from our Denver Mint program. So grab those on your way out. Here is Tony.
I do the RTD tours. And tomorrow we are going to the Denver Museum, and we're going to see IMAX D-Day 6th of June. And I have 2 tickets available to sell for tomorrow. The bus would leave at 10:30 in the morning. The show would start at 1, and then probably about 2:30 we'd get on our RTD bus and come back. So if you're interested in buying 2 tickets or 1 ticket, see me. The next thing that we're going to do, and I hate to advertise this, but on December 11th, we're going to see Jersey Boys. I'm trying to get more tickets. So right now, I only have 6 available tickets. So the first 6 people who sign up and use PayPal or we receive your check, you'll be signed up to see Jersey Boys. It's going to be at the matinee on December 11th. The price is $37.40. And again, that's RTD. which means that we pick up the bus at the park and ride at Dad Park and University. They take us right out, drop us off, pick us up right outside of the Buell area. And I have a Capitol tour too, September 30th, but that's filled. So if you're interested in any of these tours, come see me at the end of the program.
Thank you, Tony. So Jersey Boy sounds like it's got some historical roots, doesn't it? Tony's the one who selected that, yeah, so you can tell it works for her. We always try to at least be somewhat historical in our tours, like the D-Day and Normandy and all that, so I think we kind of slide a little bit on Jersey Boys here. Another tour that we have coming up is on Monday, October 6th, and we're going to go to the Botanic Gardens. Our original thought had been, the Botanic Gardens and the Cheeseman Park and all had been a cemetery, and, it's close to downtown Denver, so there's a lot of history there, but of course there's the Chihuly exhibit, so I think everybody's going to probably care more about Chihuly than they are going to care about the historicity of the Botanic Gardens. But in any event, that's on October 6th. It's a Monday, and I haven't sent any emails out at all about that yet. We just firmed that up not long ago, so very recently. And our final tour, and again, I haven't sent this out yet, we're going to be going to the Mizell Museum in December. And that's in the Hillcrest, Crestmore area. So that should be interesting. It's just a small little museum. They're going to actually be our speakers in December, and then it'll be kind of fun to go there and see the actual stuff in person then just a couple of days later. So lots of things coming up here. A couple of last things here, and that is we are selling some calendars. They are published by Historic Douglas County. Hot off the press, and this is called Ranchers of Early Douglas County, so it's the new historic calendar for 2015. It's a bargain at only $5, so I'm sure you're going to want this with all of these wonderful old-time pictures. You can buy that in the back of the room, so thank you, Jim and wife and all. They came here all the way from far away to deliver it to us. I appreciate that. Larkspur, I think, Jim, somewhere down there. And we also have the book called Walk with Our Pioneers, and that's also on the back table. That's $20. It's a really nice, big, thick book, lots of information about the old homesteaders and just the towns and all that around here. So full of really interesting facts, and it's a really good price, $20. So please stop by at the back of the room on your way out. Okay, a couple of courtesy reminders. We have two doors in the back of the room. If for any reason you need to get up, to leave for any reason, if you would please use one of those two back door rooms or back doors in the back of the room, as opposed to the side rooms. Side doors. Hopefully, it'll be a little bit quieter and not as distracting to everybody. Also, if you have a cell phone, if you would please silence your cell phone or other electronic devices. And if you are going to be taking notes or anything on a tablet, I'd appreciate it if you could kind of dim that. I know sometimes they get really bright and it's a little distracting to people around. And if you have a wide-brimmed hat, I don't see any wide-brimmed hats from up here, but if you do, if you wouldn't mind taking that off or putting it on the side so that everybody can see as much as possible. All right, I think I've done with all of my notes here. So our program tonight is the first in a series of what we're calling Highlands Ranch Then and Now. We actually have like a calendar of 3 or 4 years worth of programs that we want to do. And I'm slowly grabbing people and twisting their arms, and every now and then someone says yes. So I appreciate Mr. Phipps and Dr. Beeman here for being our first people saying yes. That's really good. So we're kicking off our program with them, and in the future, we're kind of planning like every twice a year, maybe in May and September, somewhere around there, where we'll take another topic of interest, mainly towards Highlands Ranch. Like another program that I would love to do is on the ranches, or Highlands Ranch and ranching operations and things like that. And I know that Gary at one point said he might consider doing that, and others have said that as well. So that's an upcoming program. Just have a whole series of them. I think as the years go by, it'll be really interesting. Mark is heading up part of our project on that, and Mark is videotaping it. So our plan is to put it on our website, and we're doing a lot more with those kind of things. So we'll keep your eye on our website. We'll be sending out notices as the years and months and years go by. Hopefully we'll have a lot more about local Highlands Ranch history. We just recently started our very first oral history, and one of the members of the Phipps family, Susanna Ray, was in town. So we kind of grabbed her, and she said yes. And so we've started with our very first oral history. It's been submitted to Douglas County Libraries, and I think we'll be having that on our website here very soon. And I'm hoping to get Greg and other members of the Young family and other members of the Phipps family and members of the Beeman family and lots of people in here that hopefully we can start getting a little bit more oral history of, just things that have happened and remembrances and all those kind of things. So we're slowly starting. I thank Mark for that. Mark's been great. Donna Rood is also in here somewhere. Donna, is that you over there? Donna is also helping on the project. So between Mark and Donna and then the board, we're making progress. If anybody would like to assist us with that, I'd surely appreciate that. I'm trying to twist a few arms for people to maybe do some write-ups about that. So again, we're at the very beginning stages of that. So without further ado then, let me get us started here on our program. And for our moderators, they are going to actually introduce Marvin and Mr. Phipps here, but I'll just introduce them. So we have
It's not that easy.
we have a curmudgeon in the front row here. So we've got Meg Anderson and John Lake, and they are going to be our moderators for the program, and then Lawrence Phipps will start out the program, and then we'll end with Dr. Beeman. So Meg and John, come on up here, and Lawrence, if you want to come on up here, we'll get you guys started. Meg and John have been in this area for many, many, many years, working with at the Cherokee Castle. They're caterers and have met all of these people and know them personally and just are a wealth of information. They've also written a wonderful book, and one of these days we'll get Meg to do her book again. And John, you can do your book again. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Meg and John, and they're going to do the formal introductions. Here we go.
Other than the fact that John forgot the notes, we're ready to go. We are so happy to see all of you here tonight, and we think this is particularly special because these are two gentlemen, Lawrence and Marvin over there, that have been here through generations, and that's not always possible to have someone that can go back that has lived in one place for such a long time. And Lawrence, of course, is well known for having lived at Highlands Ranch Mansion, among other places around the world. And we're just happy to have you all here and to be able to share with these wonderful people some of their memories. We're concentrating tonight on the 70s. Here's John.
Lawrence, welcome to Highlands Ranch. I don't think you can believe buildings like this. When I brought him in, what? Too much light? Okay. Great. When I walked Lawrence in, he said, "Where did the cows go?" There's a cattleman for you. I just want to take a minute to review some of Lawrence's history here. So we get him up to the 1970s. But he was born in Denver on Race Street. And you and your mother moved to Wyoming when you were very young, and you just visited the mansion occasionally for family events, as I understand it. You graduated from Princeton and served in the military, and after the military service, he came back to the ranch and started running the cattle operation in 1972. So that's our era that we're talking about now, the 1970s. And apparently when you moved back to the mansion, they gave you a bedroom. So you had just one bedroom. Apparently from 1972 then until 76, you ran the ranch until your father's death in May 16, 1976, at the age of 85. Father was 85. Is your mic on?
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Okay. One of the things that people always ask about the father's passing was if he had been ill for a long time, or if it was a sudden death, or what was the circumstances of that?
As my father aged, he was showing it, and like we all do. And, I became his attorney, in fact, to do several things for the ranch in the late 60s. And then as time went on, I got to doing more and more here at the ranch. And then he had a heart attack when he was 83. And that's when he had to stop riding horses. And that's when he stayed confined really to his house. And, but he was simpler, really reasonable to deal with until his death, which was by heart failure.
What was your relationship with your father?
Basically, my mother and my father got divorced when I was 5. I grew up with my mother in Wyoming. And I got to see my father for a couple of weeks every summer. And so we knew each other. Then, as time went on, I got to doing more and more here at Highlands Ranch. And to do that, I had to spend a lot of time with my father. First it was having lunch with him once a week in downtown Denver. Then it was a breakfast out at Highlands Ranch once or twice a week. Then it was finally seeing him daily at his home. So that was the relationship.
Great. Your mother, her name was Toonie?
Toonie, yeah.
A nickname, I suspect.
That wasn't her real name. And she let her children know what her real name was, but assured us she would kill us if we ever told her. And I'm still scared.
That may not be a secret you'll hear tonight.
And you had a sister, Joan?
So I have lots of sisters. I have Mimi, Diane, Joan, and another sister named Richmond.
But they divorced. Your father and mother divorced. Were there other wives after that?
Well, my sisters Joan, Mimi, and Diane were my father's first wife. I was scared to ask her.
So the second wife, what was her nickname? Or what did she go by?
Tootie was her name.
No, the second.
That was my mother.
He gets confused.
Lady, my father's third wife.
Oh, third, okay. It's hard for me to count all these ones. I'm lucky to have one.
Yeah, if I heard you get confused more.
So Lainey was the final wife.
Yes.
She lived until he died then.
Well, she lived for a year and a half or 2 years after he died. Then she died.
Well, you ran the cattle operation here when you came back.
Yeah.
How many cattle? What did you do? Give us a picture of the cattle operation.
Okay, so let me start with Frank Kistler. Frank Kistler, I don't know about the cattle operations of Springer and any of these other people, but Kistler got this ranch from the Phillips brothers, who founded an oil company in Oklahoma, Phillips. And he put together an oil deal, and it was really a great big deal, but they couldn't pay him a commission. So they gave him Highlands Ranch, free there, in lieu of commission. And so he was a real wheeler dealer in the oil business, and that was his greatest deal. And so he brought in a lot of cattle, but it's hard to make money off of cattle, and they're a lot of work. So then he brought in sheep, and they're even more work. But sadly, what happened was that we had several years of drought here. 1929, 1930, 31, 32, 33, 34. My father was his friend, and he let my father start a hunt at the south end of Highlands Ranch, where the training occurred. And that's when the Beemans became involved in 1930, and that's when the hunt got started. And Kistler was a member of the hunt road, but he may have been a director of the hunt, but he wasn't an officer. Then, as the drought years went on, he had more and more difficulties with his bank. And finally, the bank said, you know, you'd be well advised to find a peaceful solution rather than getting us really mad at you. And so that's when he started talking to my father, who bought the ranch in 1937. And my father was lucky. The weather had turned around. The drought years were mostly over. Sadly, Kistler had tried not only beef cattle, but dairy cattle. And what with the new construction of Broadway, it was a 2-lane gravel road all the way from county line to Maplewood. And that really facilitated transportation in. So he thought he could sell milk and dairy products. He built a big dairy barn here on the ranch, the biggest barn. But sadly, he forgot to join the Mountain Empire Dairymen's Association, which handles the marketing of milk in this region. And so we had a lot of milk, but nowhere to go with it. And a lot of cows, but no grass for them in the drought. And they had to buy hay for them. And he had to sell them off. Times got worse and worse and worse. Finally, my father was able to take over his loans. And my father operated a lot more conservatively than Frank Kistler did. And there was always 1,000 or 1,200 or 1,400, 900 cows a year here, depending on the pasture and how much hay my father was able to harvest down Plum Creek Valley, where the Chatfield Dam now is. That's where our hay meadows were, irrigated hay fields. And we put a big stacks of hay. That's what fed the cattle in the winter. But it's hard. My father never was able to pay off that loan to Kingsburg. And some years, big deals would come, like the city of Inglewood pipeline across any corner across the country. Big deal. They did make payments on principal that year. Other years, they just made interest payments. And then finally, when he died, and pay inheritance taxes. So we sold the ranch. That's what that.
And the cattle that you ran were beef cattle. Hereford?
Beef cattle.
You ran Hereford?
They were Herefords, except in the last 2 years of his life, I'd taken over, we didn't have a budget to bring in new bulls. All the old bulls were old, and a lot of them were no longer interested. That's not a good sign. Slaughterhouses pay premium for them because they make spectacular salami. Never knew I could turn on the lights for that one. So then, we needed new bulls, and I had a friend who was a rancher in Burgundy, France, and he brought his cattle here, and I agreed to pasture the cattle here, and he had an artificial insemination program. And I used his AI on my father's cows. So suddenly the cows were half bushels a unit. That was the breed of French cow. Americans always think a limousine is a fancy car with a driver, but it isn't. A limousine is some female thing from Western France, the area around Limoges.
I want you to read.
There's some very big ranchers around the bush. And they were famous in the early days of motoring. People would go, if they were really wealthy, they would go to New York, Paris, Berlin, go to an auto dealer and buy the fanciest car they could. And these ranchers, some of them from Sedan, France, would say, well, I just want a small little sedan. And that's what we call a sedan car now. And it rains in Berlin all the time. So a four-door hard type is called a Berlin. And these ranchers would go to dealers in New York, Berlin, Paris, say, I want the fanciest car you have. I refuse to learn how to drive. So you must furnish a driver. And it was called. So they also have cattle. Here at the crossbred.
Yes. Oh, good. And you're still running limousines.
Yeah. That's my chance.
I think they'd like to know about Chatfield Reservoir. That was part of your property.
I don't know how well all of you remember the summer of 1965, but we had less gully washers than we had this year, but we had bigger ones. And there was this one big one that came tore it down, took out all the Interstate 25 bridges at Castle Rock.
You know, butlers have to do their darndest. Well,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to undress.
try this.
Okay. So that flood came and washed out all the bridges between Castle Rock and all the way Hampton Avenue bridges over the Platte River washed out. Denver was separated from Lakewood, and you could telephone Lakewood, but you couldn't go there. So they decided to build Chatfield Dam, and the Army Corps of Engineers came in and took the land and initiated condemnation proceedings to pay for the land after they took it. And we did actually get paid 11 years later.
Very prompt.
And so that's where the main lake is for Chatfield, is where our hay meadows are.
And then in 1977, Marvin Davis bought the ranch.
Right.
Was that a family decision?
Well, no, my father died by that time. And Gerald Phipps and I were the executors for his estate, and which meant Highlands Ranch, essentially. And there were a string of sections down on the north side of Highlands Ranch that my father had deeded over to all of his grandchildren. These were limited partnerships. And it started at Quebec Street and just every mile south, all the way past Broadway. This thing that John showed me, that Marvin Davis paid $13 for the ranch. Well, he did. He paid a lot more because those sections were more valuable. And his grandchildren, there were three of us that were general partners. We agreed to sell to Marvin Davis those sections. And Gerald Phipps and I decided to sell Highlands Ranch. And Laney, my father's widow, concurred, and that was the deal.
Did you like Marvin?
Well, you know, Marvin was great for what you call the schmooze. He came from the garment district of New York, and he just loved to stand on the street, 17th Street in California, in downtown Denver at noon. He'd be standing there in all weather, and that's where he made all of his deals. And some local home builders talked to me about buying half a section here and half a section there. And I kept on saying, you've got to bring in a bigger gun. Because this was my father's estate, the rules are you've got to pay cash and not promises. And so they brought in Marvin Davis. And I gave him a tour of the ranch. And he was always very agreeable. One early morning, he and his lawyer picked me up. We went out for a tour here at Highlands Ranch. He said, well, I want to see the cows. So I said, well, they're over here. It's wintertime. This is winter pasture. So we went over there. I yelled at the cows, and they all came around. and 1,000 of them, you know, shrieking. And Marvin had a driver. He was in the front seat, and his lawyer and I were in the back seat. And after looking at the cows for 20 minutes, Marvin said, "Oh my God, I got to get to the office. I got an appointment." He turned to the driver and he said, "Honk your horn so clear these cows out of the way." And I said, "Oh, don't do that, don't do that." That calls the cows. And I said, "Marvin, if he did that, they'd follow you to your office." Marvin turned to me and he says, "You know, Lawrence, I just learned something." He quietly went back to his office.
But I think they'd love to hear about Centennial being filmed there. You were there for the Centennial filming.
Yeah. After Marvin bought it, then he made a deal with the Mission Diego people. I'd actually offered to show the ranch to the Mission Diego people 2 years before, but they weren't able to pay cash. And I just showed it to the local guy that was building a square section of land off of Buckley Road in Aurora. And they weren't interested. But Marvin got them interested, and they bought him out. And they said I could still run cattle here. So I still had all my father's employees here. And everything was the same as there was nobody living on the ranch except people connected to my father's establishment. And they said, "This will only take a couple, 10 days max. It's the middle of winter, you don't have anything else to do. We won't interfere with your operations at all." And so we want to do it. I said, "Okay. All I'm doing is I'm leasing the pasture back from you. And if those guys film business don't eat grass, I'm not involved." And so they moved in. I didn't realize it was Universal United Pictures, the big one, you know, the big studio. And they came in with trailers, costumes, and trailers of little rooms for the different actors, whatever, makeup rooms. And then they came in with a commissary for, you know, breakfast and their lunch and cocktails in the evening. And then I didn't realize what else comes in with the film production company. They had their own drug dealers. and suddenly there was all kinds of cocaine, marijuana, heroin, and crack all over the bunkhouse and in the cookhouse. And then they told one of their actors to go in the makeup room and restudy his lines. And they put a construction heater under that trailer in winter. It was cold. And it ate up all the oxygen. And suddenly the actor didn't come out of his makeup room. And so they sent a grip over there to get him. The grip came back and said, "He's dead." And at that time, I was involved in a wrongful death suit involving my father in California. He'd hired a guy to work on his property there, and the guy had had a heart attack and died, had gotten electrocuted because somebody had badly wired my father's property. And so here I was again in the middle of a wrongful death. I was very unhappy about it, and they weren't, Mission Diego, the Philip Morris people weren't too happy either. And they finally said, well, Lawrence, let's part ways. We were all glad to part ways. And so that ended my formal arrangements with the ranch. And that was sometime around whenever Centennial was 78, 79, 80.
What about the cow hens?
Oh, that's another thing. When they did Centennial, I had all these cowboys working here at the ranch with my cows. And these guys, these actors, of course, were good actors with great portfolios, and studio resumes and everything, but they didn't know how to put on spurs. And they didn't know how to ride horses. And suddenly it was, well, do you mind if we have these cattle sort of walk them over the hill here with your cowboys behind them? And I said, yeah. Then the guy says, you know, we just took that when an airplane flew over. So can we do it again? And after about the fourth time, I was getting nervous. And, but what really burned me was the drug dealers.
Yeah.
University of United had no control. They were all over. They had a gambling game that started at 5 o'clock every morning. These guys had moved in, and they had dice, and they had cards, and whatever game you wanted, bar, booth, poker, just as long as it was for money, they got the pot. So, that was that.
Well, let's transition a little bit to the Arapaho hunt girls.
Okay?
How that actually started talking about that earlier when we were talking. Because Marvin's going to come up and talk later.
Right.
And we'll kind of transition into that. Where did you hunt on the ranch when you were master?
Well, everybody starts, you just ride in the back of the hunt. So, the hunt got started in 1930. And George Beeman, Marvin's father, became huntsman in 1931, I think. And they handled the hounds and the mechanics of the hunt, took care of all the horses. And it was an elaborate, it was a breeding establishment, studs, mares, polo ponies, and everything. And so when I got out of the Army, I started hunting, and that was in the winter of 1958. And for about 8 years, I rode the back of the hunt, and I became the honorable secretary. And our regular secretary, Josiah Holland, was getting infirm and stopped hunting. I took over from him. And then a couple years later, I became the joint master and then master. And I've been in that since.
And you hunted all of the life of the ranch.
Right, we hunted the whole ranch. And then we hunted Cherokee. And the city of Denver let us hunt Daniels Park as well. And you should ask Marvin the question about how well he gets along with buffalo. No, hunting's a lot of fun, and the problem is you got to have a horse, and it's in the winter. We start hunting in October and hunt until April, or late April, and some days it's cold and windy. Other days it's just wet and cold and windy.
But I think many of the audience doesn't know what you're talking about.
We've only hunted coyote here. It's called a fox hunt because we dress up like the fox hunters do on the east or west coast or in England. And we use English foxhounds. And so it's called a foxhound, and we all belong to the Masters of Foxhounds Association of North America, and are part of that scenario. Indeed, Marvin was president of it a couple of years ago. And that's what it is. And it's fun, but sometimes the weather isn't accommodating.
Well, let's give Marvin a chance now, and we'll take.
We're going to get Marvin up and get him started, and then we're going to have 15 minutes of questioning that you can think of wonderful questions out there, because I know one of them already. So.
While we're getting the mechanics going, I can't tell you what a pleasure this is for me. Lawrence and I are basically the same age, and so we were both born on Highlands Ranch, and I had the privilege of living there until I graduated from college, and so I got to do all of the things that we were so lucky. One thing that Lawrence didn't mention that his father did for both of us, and he taught us how to play polo. And the first polo field was just about a half a mile straight west of where the big house is. And Mr. Phipps put that field in there and he originally had his polo ponies over in Elbert, just a little bit north of the town of Elbert. And then in 1942, when the war started, all of the polo ponies came over to Highlands Ranch. So anyway, that's something that we really got to enjoy, was the polo that his dad taught us both to do. And he used to say to us, "Okay, you guys, get together. Don't be trying to hit the ball too hard. Do what you're told. And remember that hunting is a sport and polo is a game, and don't confuse the two." But both of us had a wonderful time there, and both of us had played polo until about 1985, somewhere along in there. And we had the field was eventually moved over to where the law enforcement center is. How many of you have gone into the law enforcement center, and that flat field where there are some cattle pens there right now is where the polo field was built? And Mr. Phipps built that. My dad and I did the construction work, and I ran a D2 Caterpillar across there when I wasn't hardly big enough to run a Caterpillar, but I had a good time tearing things up. Well, my duty tonight is to talk mostly about the Arapahoe Hunt Club, and I pushed the button to go forward, and I pushed the button to go backwards, I guess. There we go. There we go. These pictures are not the most thrilling pictures, but these were taken from a video a long time ago, and that's what I thought we would talk about tonight. On the screen there is actually the people that were involved that we're talking about. The hounds, of course, and this is my father, the huntsman, George Beeman, and the story about he and Highlands Ranch is in 1929, when Mr. Phipps had gotten permission from Mr. Kistler to put the hounds over where the law enforcement center is. And at that time, a friend of my father's from Sedalia was working there, and they needed some help and he went and asked my dad if he'd come and help him for a couple of weeks. And my dad agreed to do that. And he went and he looked at the hounds. My dad was raised on a ranch just south of Sedalia, where 105 and 63 split. Right there is the ranch where my dad was born. And so he had no idea about somebody riding around in an English saddle chasing a bunch of hounds. And you know, ranchers are looked at us a little askew anyway, later on too. But he went there, he agreed, he said, I'll come and help you with the things there. He said, I will help with the horses, but I don't want a thing to do with those damn dogs. Well, that 2 weeks turned into 56 years. And he started as a whipper-in, and that's one of the people that helped the huntsman with the hounds in 1929. And he whipped for, at that time, Mr. Phipps had a huntsman that was from Scotland, and he was rather abrasive and so forth, drank a little like a lot of huntsmen do. I don't drink, but boy, yes, I do drink. But I don't drink a lot, sometimes. Anyway, this fella was hunting the hounds, and he suddenly in 1934 left. And Mr. Phipps came to my dad and said, do you think you can hunt the hounds? And Dad agreed to do that. And the Scotsman had been so mean to the hounds, they would not hunt. And so Dad tried to figure out what to do about getting that solved. And he took his youngest brother, who at that time was about 16 years old, and my mother's youngest brother, and made them into whipper-ins. And they hunted that pack of hounds every day from the end of April till the 1st of September. And that fall, then the hounds hunted, and Mr. Phipps was enamored by what my dad had done, and that developed a relationship at the Arapahoe Hunt Club that was forever and ever a very wonderful situation. So I'm going to tell you a little bit now more about the hunt. Here were the boundaries of the hunt, within a half a mile of Sedalia, along 85 with a few little ranches just east of 85, clear to the county line road here, Arapahoe County Line Road, and ran from the Daniels Park Road to begin with, north a little bit, and then he bought the Cheese Ranch in 1943, and the Cheese Ranch is just a little ways north of here, and it's called the Cheese Ranch because those people made cheese and took it to Denver and sold it. And then he also bought a place south, right next to the Cherokee Ranch, which was called Douglas Investment. So that's the boundary, and it basically went almost to within a mile. It did go to within a mile of I-25, and as Lawrence said about the hay ground down under Chatfield Dam, and eventually Highlands Ranch was 28,000 acres, and we hunted all of that country. As a matter of fact, this country right here, where we're sitting, this was called the East Ranch, and we would be involved here several times. As a matter of fact, about not quite a half a mile from right here, I had one of the biggest wrecks I've had hunting. My horse, I galloped him over the top of a hill, hit a great big snowdrift. He did a somersault. Some way in the wreck, I mashed my head a little bit. More than a little bit, quite a lot. Some people say it's affected you ever since. So, but that's the kind of memories that Lawrence and I have of the Highlands Ranch. And we galloped Wildcat Mountain. You all know where Wildcat Mountain is. Big rock faces mountain out here, just a little ways from here. We used to hunt a lot over there. From the kennels was at the Law Enforcement Center. And if you go there, there's a little stone house. And how many of you been to the Law Enforcement Center? Anybody been there? Yes. The little stone house that is sitting there right next to when you drive in, that was the house that my mother and father moved into in 1934. And I was a year old, And that's where I grew up, in that one-room house. But then Mr. Phipps built 2 bedrooms on, and then eventually built another bedroom on. And we didn't have electricity there until 1945. And I could still remember the electrician climbed up the pole and looked at the electricity into the house. And it was on July the 3rd in 1945. And the reason I remember that is we had bought my father an electric razor, and he went up there, turned the electricity on. My dad shaved with an electric razor. Until that time, I went through most of my grade school training with using a coal oil lamp and gasoline lanterns. But it was a wonderful place to grow up. Anyway, the geography I've told you about. Now, the stables where the horses were kept were at the same place. The original stable had only 6 stalls down. I'm sorry, this is. Can you hear me all right? I'm getting too close to my mouth. The original stables where the law enforcement center is was only a 6-stall barn down, and it was 2 layers. There was a top part also that was a hayloft. And when the hunt started there, that was the only place they had to stable the horses. Well, that stable, then, we put another 6 stalls up above. And the horses, that made us have 13 horses. Then in 1945, Mr. Phipps had my father design a stable that had another 18 stalls that went east. Now, those of you that have been to the law enforcement center, that's where the big machine shed is on the east side of where the development is there. That barn has since burned down. But then in 1947, we built another 18 stalls. So it turns out that every night during the winter, during hunting season, there would be 47 horses that hunted regularly that went in that stable complex. Then below there, below where the little stone house is, was a group of barns that the brood mares lived in and the young horses. So every night there would be around 75 head of horses that would go into that stable area. And the brood mares and their babies, that's down below, and the hunters up above, as I mentioned. And my father and Mr. Phipps did some things that weren't supposed to work. Well, they did a lot of things that weren't supposed to work, but they damn sure did. And one of the things was those horses all stood in tie stalls as opposed to box stalls. And consequently, they would behave better. They didn't take as much bedding. They didn't take as much care. And they had one person hired for every 9 horses. And those horses were exercised daily. Their tack was clean, and so forth. So they eventually had quite a few people working there. And then the hounds lived in a enclosure right next between the stone house and the stable. These hounds, as Lawrence said, are straight English hounds, as opposed to American hounds, as opposed to crossbreds, as opposed to coonhounds, red tick, blue ticks, etc. And Mr. Phipps went to England and saw the hunts there, and he was very pleased with the English hounds. And so he started that. He and my father would then develop more and more hounds. Eventually, we had 50 couples. You can count hounds by the 2. We can't count much beyond 50, so we had to do it that way. And so they had 100. We had 100 hounds. And Mr. Phipps was so good about taking the financial end of all of that, but that's what he wanted to do. He had gone to England and saw the hounds that hunted in England that way, and they just bred them there. And the kennels, we would have the puppies. There's still one little tiny building just above the stone house that was where the puppies were born. But the rest of the kennels and all that is gone. As I said, the barn burned down. But anyway, that's the background for the Arapahoe Hunt Club. And when the war came along, that was another monumental time in the span of the Arapahoe Hunt Club. Of course, December the 7th, 1941, changed the world, really. And that particular day may be of interest to you. Those of you that have gone to Cherokee Ranch, and the big house at Cherokee Ranch, where you turn off of the Daniels Park Road and turn in those gates, that day, the Arapaho hunt met right there to hunt that part of the country. And my uncle, he rode one horse and led 3 horses, and in 41 I was 8 years old. I rode one horse and led another horse from the law enforcement center over the top of the hill where the castle is, down to the gate. And I didn't get to go hunt that day, and I thought my feet were frozen. Mr. Phipps had bought my dad a new International pickup, and it had a manifold heater in it. It was an Marvin heater. I can still remember that because my feet were so cold. I stuck my toe, cut my toe on the fan in the heater. Then when we started home, we stopped by Sedalia to get something because my aunt and uncle had a grocery store in Sedalia, and he told us about the war starting. And that happened, and so then later on February the 12th of 1942, my dad's horse fell down. If you look, when you're driving out Wildcat Preserve Road, and you look straight south, and you see the anticline that's there right over here, a horse fell down with my dad coming down off of that hill and broke his shoulder, so he couldn't go to the Army. But my uncles, one went to the Navy, and one went to the Army. And Mr. Phipps went to the Army. Mr. Phipps went to Fort Robinson, Nebraska. And that was a huge remount station. I'm going to get too far away here, but I'll be a little careful about all of the things I'm trying to not say and not think about. But that set the stage for my life, because when my uncles left, and Dad didn't have any help, but he couldn't go to the service because of his broken shoulder. And I started then helping my father as a whipper-in 1943. I was the youngest recognized whipper-in in the Masters of Foxhounds of America. And I hunted there till we left the ranch. And my dad hunted the hounds until 1986, when we left the ranch. And then I started hunting the hounds in 1986, and I've hunted the hounds through. I started hunting again this fall, and I've hunted with us either as a whipper-in or as a huntsman for 70 years. And I had a scarlet coat that fit me about that long because it was my uncle's and it was little. But let's get back now more about the Highlands Ranch and the Arapaho Hunt Club. The Arapaho Hunt Club, actually started in 1903 by Lawrence's father, L.C. Phipps Jr., and that picture was taken about where the 9th green is at the Denver Country Club. And during World War I, the hunt went inactive. And then when Lawrence talked about Mr. Kistler, he allowed Mr. Phipps to go and move on toward the training center is. That hunt then moved there, and the Arapaho hunt moved there in 1929. And as I told you about my dad working there, now the Arapaho Hunt Club became recognized by the Masters of Foxhounds of America in 1934. It was the second hunt west of the Mississippi River. There was a hunt in Washington State that was at the military reserve there in Washington State that was recognized before we were. But we remained in that position for many, many years before there were some hunts in California, and now there are not very many hunts west of the Mississippi River. But Mr. Phipps started. This is a really good picture of Mr. Phipps. He was one of the kindest people I've ever known. He was an astute reader and a wonderful kind of a person, and had such an effect upon what we did as a family, and was so good to my mother and father and me also, and horses to ride and the hounds to have to do all the things we wanted to do were just spectacular. Now, tell you a little bit about the way the ranch was built up, or what we did with the fences. Many of the pastures here had 3 sections. Lawrence, I don't know if I think the front pasture was the biggest pasture. And we called the front pasture the pasture that ran from Daniels Park Road, clear down to the reservoir right there, the Holland Reservoir, down on the county line. And that one pasture, that was the front pasture. And then there was the purebred pasture. You talk about the movie of, that was can't think of the name of it right, Centennial. That was taken in section 15. And that was the section straight east of where the big house is, where the big barn that Lawrence talked about. So those pictures in Centennial on the cattle, that's the pasture that you were driving the cattle. And that was right on the other side of Daniels Park Road and next to there. And that's where the purebred cattle of Mr. Phipps' lived, was there. So anyway, the Arapaho hunt grew and grew and grew. And because of Mr. Phipps, as I said, now this is a picture of my father and the hound with him. And that was taken about halfway between the big house and the law enforcement center. And the horses that he's riding, or the horse he's riding, Mr. Phipps bred those horses. A lot of them came from the pole ponies, and as Lawrence said earlier, we had a stallion all the time at Highlands, at the hunt club, and they were ancestors of remount horses. The remount horses were horses that the Army, so that they could have replacements for the cavalry, they would take those thoroughbred horses and give those horses to people, and Mr. Phipps was one of them, had the remount stallions, and they could breed the mares, and then the Army had the first right of refusal to buy those horses when they were young and replace the remount horses. And that's what Mr. Phipps was doing in the Army in Fort Robinson, Nebraska. That was the largest remount station, and it was active till very close to the end of the war. But my father, as I said, he adapted to the English way of doing with the hounds, all through his inherited ability to hunt. He had a brother that was much more of a hunter than he was, as far as hunting with a gun, but Dad had that instinct to do that, and he taught himself to hunt, he taught me to hunt, he taught my wife to hunt, he taught my sister to hunt. My son, who's sitting here, he hunted with Dad. As a matter of fact, we just south of here, we were going up on Wildcat Mountain when he was about 6 years old. And we crossed the Daniels Park Road and started towards Wildcat Mountain, and I galloped up on a hill, and he was coming along behind me, and I stopped real quick, and his horse ran into the back of mine, and I looked around just as he was falling off over the horse's head, and I grabbed him by the seat of the breeches and pulled him back in the saddle. His hunting cap was on the side, and he looked at me and he says, "Daddy, don't stop so damn fast. I nearly fell off." And then later on in that hunt, we went on the top of Wildcat Mountain. And here's a picture that is especially priceless to me. That's Mr. Phipps right there, and Lawrence is right there, and I'm right there, and Grant is right there, and my nephew is right there. Here's the barn that I was talking about, one of the barns. And that was taken from a movie that they were going to make a document of sporting. A fellow from Wichita, Kansas, J.A. Mull, took this video, and they had these wonderful pictures in there. This is what Lawrence looked like when he became a master. We've had a wonderful time hunting together. We've been many, many miles. People ask us how far we've ridden, and I figured up a little bit. I've walked about 120,000 miles chasing those hounds around and some other things. And I had the advantage of hunting with the hounds when Lawrence was in Wyoming. But there's a huge amount of tradition with that hunt, with the Arapaho Hunt Club. Our colors are scarlet coats. We wear scarlet coats and the stock ties and our black velvet collars. Now we wear piping on there that is cactus green. And as he said, it mimics fox hunting in England. The hounds, the horses, the huntsmen, the whipper-ins, the field masters, and we mimic that a lot. Now, we had a little trouble, as I alluded to earlier, of convincing people that the cowboys, especially, that we knew how to ride. And they kind of teased the dickens out of me when I was a little boy about riding around with these little bitty white breeches and on that little bitty saddle and so forth. But if you wanted to get some excitement, just put them on the English saddle and chase a cow around across this country for about 18 miles. And they decided that it was a pretty good deal as far as it wasn't near sissy-like. One time we had a hunt that, and before the war, we would go meet at where the big house is, where the barns are. We'd bring the hounds over from where the training center is, over the hill, and we'd meet from there. And this particular hunt, I can remember, I was 6 years old, and we invited the Arapaho County Sheriff's Posse to come and hunt with us. Well, they came in their western saddles, and they were all dressed up. And before we went hunting, they were making their horses stop and turn and wheel around, and we thought, well, they're having a good time. So I'll never forget this hunt because we went west, and the coyote ran across the county line road, and then turned east and ran parallel to the county line road, clear up to where Colorado Boulevard is, and then went back into the ranch, and we went up over the incline and then back to the kennels, or not the kennels, but to the Highlands Ranch, where we had met. And those people actually literally ran two of their horses so hard that they died. And from then on, they quit making fun of us with our English saddles and what we did then. Here's a closer picture of the hounds. At the time, this was taken in the early 60s. And there's a closer picture of our English hounds. And we now hunt. We left Highlands Ranch, left the Arapaho Hunt Club in 1986, 10 years after Mr. Phipps had died. Mission Viejo let us stay there and hunt until that time. And then we moved the hunt from there out east of the racetrack on the old Lowry bombing range. And that's where we hunt now. Here's a better picture of the hounds. And that is actually taken where we hunt now. And there's a picture of my father again, and this is on the polo field at the Law Enforcement Training Center. That's where I told you about the corrals. And then actually we were parading the hounds at that time. This is a picture taken on the bombing range. And as I said, I've been hunting the hounds since we moved over there. My father got to hunt 2 years when we were there. Excuse me. And he would hunt the hounds sometimes, and I'd hunt the hounds sometimes. But we have continued to carry on the traditions that Mr. Phipps started here on Highlands Ranch. This is another picture of a part of the ceremonies that we have. We bless the hounds every fall on our first hunt, and excuse me, that's what we have a preacher come and give us the various kinds of prayers, and we really enjoy the traditions of hunting, and it's been such a delightful thing to do, a wonderful thing to do. Here's another picture, and that's taken halfway between the big house and the law enforcement training center. And that's a picture of me when I was 10 years old. And my dad's here, and Mr. Phipps is right in there. And there he is right there. That mare that he's riding, his name was Aya. Aya was a chestnut mare that he really enjoyed. And this is a picture taken just above the law enforcement center. And that is a whipper-in out looking for coyotes. And that's when we see a coyote, we hold our caps up and holler tally-ho, and that's my sister that was hunting then. And then we chase the coyotes, and that's a kind of a shaggy-looking picture of a coyote. But I have a story I have to tell you about the relationship to the development of Highlands Ranch and chasing the coyotes. As remember, we didn't leave until '86. Well, they built several houses out here just next to County Line Road, Mission Viejo had, and they had a trail that went up what we call Venice Gulch. They call it Dad's Clark's Gulch. Now, as a matter of fact, it's the gulch that runs right by the V out here and turns and goes west. And the hounds had chased this coyote. We were coming up that gulch, and there was a path there, and there was a lady and her husband walking along the path, and they had a great big collie dog. And that lady looked up, and here the hounds were coming. They saw the coyote go by, and here the hounds came. And here I came, and this lady, she couldn't have weighed more than 125 pounds. She has this great big collie dog. They come, she says, "Don't you kill my dog, don't you kill my dog, don't you kill my dog." I apologized. I said, "Ma'am, we're not going to bother your dog." And it was such an ironic thing to see that happen. And that was the day when that happened. I thought about the change from the Arapahoe Hunt Club, thank you, the Arapahoe Hunt Club to the city that it is where you all live, or not you all live, but now. And it was a little bit like seeing the last buffalo. And we actually, as a matter of fact, we were hunting right over here just a little ways. So that's kind of the story of the Arapahoe Hunt Club and Lawrence and me. And this is blowing the horn to say we're going to quit. And so there they are chasing the coyote across the countryside. And that's where we hunt today rather than here. That's out here we're jumping and jump. This was an old Highlands Ranch, and that's Lawrence jumping the jump right there, or already just a jump right there. This is taken just about 2 miles this side of the law enforcement center. And these are pictures of where we hunt now. This picture is taken just on the other side of the anticline that you see right here. It'd be just about straight southwest of here, going down the other side. And here's another picture of the old barn and the hounds coming home. And here's a recent picture that we took when we hunted at Cherokee. We hunt every year from Cherokee, and we have permission from Highlands Ranch to hunt the open country, the back country they call it, and we get to hunt there. So we get to come home for that, and we leave from the castle. The castle is right there in the background, and these are the present whipper-ins, and that's myself and the whipper-ins that we have pictures. And photography's improved a little, hasn't it? And that's another picture there. And this is a picture from the castle. These are pictures taken out where we hunt today. And that's the end of my story.
Yeah, tell the buffalo story.
Well, here's the story about the buffalo. As Lawrence said, we had permission to hunt into the buffalo pasture. and the west fence, there was a big gate, we could go through there. And this particular day, we had gone sort of right towards Douglas Park Road, straight east. And the hounds had run up through there, up kind of along one of those cliffs. And my job was to go to the right side of the hounds. My dad went with the hounds up the bottom to the side. And as I turned to go up to the right, there were several buffaloes bedded down. There were some on one side of this little ridge and some on the other. And I thought, well, I think I can just ride up between them. And so I was going along there, trotting along, and they kind of got up and started to move off to the left and to the right. And all of a sudden, this cow, buffalo, she turned around and she blew snot out of her nose and her tail went in a ring like that. And here she came. This horse I was riding was known to buck a little bit. And I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to do? I hope I can outrun this thing. But it didn't look like I was going to do it. But I'll tell you one thing for damn sure, I wasn't about to fall off. There's another little sequel to that. About 2 months before that, we had a coyote had gotten up under a bank, and the hounds were messing with this coyote, and so we needed to dispatch the coyote. So my dad said, okay, you get off your horse and you need to see if you can put that coyote down with a stick. And you could if you hit him right in front of their eyes. And so I'm climbing over this bank, and this coyote sees me, and the coyote starts to run, and I fell. The snow was about 4 inches deep. I fell down, and the coyote ran up the bank, and he fell down and fell right on my chest. His eye is right there, and I'm thinking, if I move, he's going to bite me in the face. So I thought, okay, and I moved my left arm, and the coyote grabbed me right around right there. I still have the coat that has the coyote teeth holes in there, and I was able to get the coyote unconscious then. I looked up, and my dad was just about to die laughing on his horse. I said, good deal, I'm 45 years old, and here you're going to get a big kick out of that coyote beating on me. Well, then 2 weeks or a little bit later, the buffalo story. So I got bitten by a coyote like that, and then later on got chased by a buffalo. So that's the buffalo story.
You're getting more mics on. I think we have mics for the audience, but I know there's one question, Nick.
There was a question about the windmills, and Lawrence has a wonderful story, a abbreviated story about windmills.
So there's a lot of windmills on Highlands Ranch, and there used to be a lot more. And that was our only source of water because there weren't any power lines through the ranch. And so these windmills were actually developed by the Chinese about 200 BC. And the Chinese thought it out and built them, and nobody's improved on them since. They still. So there were two up above the mansion, up on top of the hill. Now there's only one there. And that's the stone one. And that was the big one. And there's been many a day I had to go up to that well, turn it off, pull the pipe out of it, fix the leathers down in the bottom, and replace it. And that stone building, for some reason, really attracted rattlesnakes. And all summer long, it was always filled with rattlesnakes. And you couldn't work on a windmill without first going and killing the rattlesnakes. Then one guy had to climb up to the top of the tower, start disconnecting things, and another guy down at the bottom. And we were working pulleys and winches. And as brilliant as the Chinese were in developing them, they weren't very concerned about human safety. And those things can be deadly to work with. The dust storms can, dust devils can suddenly hit or gust of wind while you're standing up on the platform next to all those blades. And the people working underneath, they can be hit by falling parts or tools that you drop. And I got so that I wouldn't work on them without wearing hard hats and safety belts. And it still was scary.
The water stored up there.
Yeah, there's a big cistern up there. There's a big rectangular cistern. And it's about 100 feet by 200 feet concrete. It was built by Kistler back in the 1920s. And, it'd store water. We'd have to clean that out about every 5 years.
Do we have any questions?
Yes, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone.
Yes.
Speak to the mic so everybody can hear you.
How'd you terminate the coyotes? Did you usually shoot them, or did they die from exhaustion, or how did that end? Or did you just walk away from them?
Well, first of all, we don't catch very many of them. Because if you catch them every time you go hunting, if you caught them, you wouldn't have anything to chase. We do catch occasional coyotes that are usually crippled or infirmed, and we do catch them, put them at bay, and then we shoot them. But we don't catch them very often. Yeah, we know you do. If we could get with the sheriff and have him make sure that we didn't get shot running through people's yards, it'd be a lot of fun to chase them. You're right.
Yes, got a question relating to the mansion. I was just wondering on the artwork in some of the bathrooms, if you could give a little clarity, Mr. Phipps, about who did that artwork.
I don't know.
There was a rumor that perhaps one of Mrs.
Beautiful, but I don't know.
Don't?
We heard at one point that it was one of the wives, and it is in one of our books. So come down afterwards and we'll look it up for you.
Any questions, just raise your hands.
Mr. Johnson originally built the Cherokee Ranch and called it Charleford. Did he participate in the hunt, or his sons?
Yes, he did. And actually, my father worked on the castle when he was a youngster too. And my grandmother and her father homesteaded just about a half a mile northeast of the castle. My dad used to ride by there, the castle, when he was a boy, when they started building it early. From Sedalia, he'd ride out there to see his grandfather.
Okay. I always thought that it was the master of the hounds who wore red, and that was specifically designated that way. But I guess I'm wrong. What can you tell me about that, please?
Yes, ma'am, I can. First of all, the structure of the hunt is when you start hunting, the first thing you receive for hunting 2 or 3 years, you get the button of the hunt to put on a coat. And that's an A with the crossbar as a hunting horn for the Arapaho hunt. And that entitles you to wear a black coat. And the ladies wear black coats. Then when you're if you continue to be interested, you're invited then to wear a scarlet coat. And that is true of the people, the members that ride in the field. Now, the people that are with the hounds, they are given, or they're supposed to wear a scarlet coat. Not supposed, they do wear a scarlet coat on formal days. That's why you saw the scarlet coats with my dad and myself, and that's how that works here. And most hunts are that way. Each hunt is identified with their button, with their collar, and there's 2 or 3 hunts in the United States that wear green coats. And some 2 or 3 in England that wear green coats. But traditionally, they wear the scarlet coats. The ladies wear the black, the men wear the scarlet coats. And the number of buttons on your coat tells you 3 buttons for a member of the field that's been invited. And then the whipper-ins can have 4 buttons on their coat. The master will have 4 buttons on their coats. And the huntsman has 5. Good question.
More questions? Just raise your hand. Yes.
Yeah, folklore says that back in the 30s, when Prohibition was still going, that there's an underground tunnel going from maybe the mansion all the way over to Platte River. Any truth to that?
Not that I know of. There is a tunnel from the west end of the house all the way to the kitchen. And there's a well under there, under where the dining room used to be. But no tunnels leading away from the house that I know of.
More questions?
I think that's going to be our last.
I did hear that there was a tunnel from Woolhurst over, and I don't know much about that.
That story is from Woolhurst, where the trailer park is, that there was a tunnel from there to where the Littleton Equine Medical Center is. And my wife and I lived there for 5 years. We never did find that tunnel. All we had was a ghost. My wife believes 100% in that. And by the way, my wife and my 2 children, we lived at Highlands Ranch in one of the bungalows until the flood in 1965, from 1960 till 65. And so we had a lot to do. I want to say one thing about the big barn that Lawrence mentioned. They milked 300 cows in that big barn at a time. Mr. Kissler had that.
And I think that's going to need to end it. Thank you guys so very much.
One thing we might do is have the members of the Rebel Hunt, which we have several here, if you would stand and acknowledge. Come on, Greg.
All right, that will end it. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Meg and John and Lawrence and